Hello and welcome to the Leathercraft Masterclass, and in this video I want to share with you some of the pieces, some of the bags and cases that I've made and hopefully inspire you and give you some ideas for your own creations. So I want to go through some of the bags that I've made in video courses. So I teach video courses, leathercraftmasterclass.com, link below. But I also have made bags as prototypes, and I also have a bag that I've very selfishly made for myself. But just to give you an idea of some of the different creations that I've made, what was the thought process behind them, why I chose the leathers that I chose, just what's the difference between different leather types and different types of bags, and thoughts and considerations that go into making these builds. So I want to share this with you so that you can then take what you want from this and apply it to your own leather goods when making bags, when making wallets, because the idea of this is to gain inspiration. But more importantly, for this video, I'm talking about where I gained inspiration from, so that you can then use that, or that kind of mindset, to then gain and find inspiration from everyday life, from your experiences, from your childhood. It really doesn't matter, but the idea is to put something of yourself, something that's honest, something that's from a place of passion and what you really love into your leather goods to make them truly unique to you. And that really comes across in products when you're selling to customers, or even just making your own leather goods, that what you create, there's a part of you in there. And in this video, I'm discussing what part of me and my thought process goes into making these goods. So I'm going to start with the latest bag that I created. This was for the video course, the de Havilland travel bag. It was a 4-part video series on how to create your own luxury bag. The idea behind this course is to empower more leather crafters to take a leap onto larger leather goods, onto luxury leather goods, without being more complicated than necessary, yet at the same time having, including techniques and designs that kind of give off the luxury vibe, shall we say. So we're not making a bag that's very easy to do, but at the same time it's no more complicated than it needs to be. So essentially this 24-hour bag can actually be made in 24 hours. Okay, so the first bag is the de Havilland travel bag, and it's a combination of different tannages. So it's chrome tanned and it's also vegetable tanned. So this is the bag here, and the front, the base and the sides, the zip gusset, are all made from chrome tanned leather. So chrome tanned leather is a lot softer, it's very durable, it's also stretchy. So there are some considerations when using it that you don't have to consider so much when you're using vegetable tan leather. Now there's a big debate on which leather is better, the pros and cons. There's lots of different arguments for and against, but I don't actually have a preference. I don't prefer vegetable tan leather over chrome tan leather. I like to use chrome tan leather where it suits best. So if I want a bag that is soft, lightweight, more water resistant, and also very durable and scratch resistant, then I'll use chrome tan leather. But there are some aspects of the bag, for example the handles, these are rolled handles. I much prefer to have that in vegetable tan leather because it's firmer, it ages well, and where it picks up the dirt and sweat and greases from your hands, it kind of deepens the color of the vegetable tan leather, and it really does improve over time in that sense. Whereas high wear areas like the piping and the handles tend to look worse for wear as time goes by on chrome tan leather. So chrome tan leather in my mind doesn't age quite as well. It always looks its best on day one, whereas vegetable tan leather tends to look better over time with wear, with use. So on high wear areas, I tend to use vegetable tan leather, and on lower wear areas, I tend to use, well, in this case, prefer to use chrome tan leather. If we made this bag completely in vegetable tan leather, it would be very, very hard to flip. It's extremely hard to flip a bag, and this bag is flipped in the sense it's stitched on the inside. So you can see here piped seam going all the way around, but what you don't see is the stitching, which is actually on the inside. So the bag is stitched together inside out, and then it's flipped right side out, and that's what you're seeing here. And that works much, much better. It's much easier to do with chrome tan leather. So this bag is actually, the inspiration behind it was the de Havilland Comet, which was the first passenger jet airliner. Invented, I believe, in the 50s, and the de Havilland Comet is a very special aircraft because it opened up a new era of jet travel for people. Now, it wasn't a particularly good aircraft, it had a terrible safety record, but it was the aircraft that everybody else learnt from. So all the mistakes that went into this aircraft, you know, other companies like Boeing, for example, then learnt, you know, what they needed to avoid and how to improve. But essentially the de Havilland Comet was the first of its kind. And if it wasn't for that, it would probably be a very long time before somebody eventually invented the passenger jet aircraft with its pressurized cabin. And travel may not be what it is today. Who knows what would have happened, but it was a pinnacle moment for travel. So I thought I would name this bag after it. Now, I almost called it the de Havilland cabin bag, but I prefer travel bag. But it is designed to go into the cabin hold over your head when you're sitting in an aircraft. So it is the size and dimensions. It meets most American and European airline dimension maximums. So that's the main consideration behind this. But also the attachments here, also called chaps, C-H-A-P-E-S. These handle attachments are the exact dimensions, except for the rounding on the corners, of the de Havilland Comet's rear tail wing. So the horizontal tail wing, these are essentially copying that. So it has elements of the aircraft design, and the same goes for the side of the bag. Okay, so the zip gusset going around it also has the same dimensions as the wing, so the vertical wing. But it wasn't just an aircraft that inspired this design, it was actually a shoe, a hole cut shoe by Gaziano and Girling in London. They designed a hole cut shoe, which is essentially one piece of leather for the upper of the shoe. And after seeing this shoe, and I thought it's just a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, because it's very, very difficult for an artisan to make. It's one piece of leather all the way around, and there's only a seam at the very back, a very small seam. So you'll have one piece of leather as the upper, and then of course you have the sole, which is stitched to. So I thought to myself, how could I introduce that into the bag making world? Because one of the benefits, although in the shoe world is actually very difficult to do, a hole cut shoe, it does take a lot of stitching time out of it, so it would speed up the process. But a hole cut shoe is also considered more luxurious because it's just a pure piece of leather and it's challenge. So I thought, how could I get that, something that is considered more luxurious but also saves time, into a bag course? So I thought, how about instead of having a panel on a bag, the base of the bag, and then the panel on the other side, so 3 pieces essentially, I thought, how could I make this a one piece? So I worked out how I could stiffen the inside of the bag base and then taper the reinforced bag base so it smoothly goes into the curve of the bag. So what you end up with is the panel is also the base, is also the other side of the bag. So we don't have anything stitched in here. And the benefit of this means that not only do you get to use one piece, which is considered more luxurious because it's harder to do, to get a piece of that size without any blemishes on the hide. So you need a high quality piece of leather to do this. But also, there's 2 extremely long stitches that are very awkward to stitch because you have this huge piece when it's opened out. You don't have to do that. So it takes out a considerable amount of stitching time, and making 3 separate pieces, you only have to make 1 piece. So it saves time, adds a luxurious element, and it means it is seamless down the sides. Now, much like the shoe that it has inspiration coming from, I have the upper here, which is the zip gusset. So that is the secondary piece. So that is like the upper, and I consider this part here like the sole of the shoe. So that's the design inspiration behind this. The color choice is more of a personal one. The reason I went for this particular color is because one of the things that I love doing is traveling. And when I go to a city or a place that I've never been before, one of the best ways I find to pick up the culture of a particular city or a town, and just kind of people watch and see what's going on, and you know, just to kind of like, you arrive, you put your bags down, you go out and you just go and grab a coffee somewhere, and you sit outside on a chair and you just observe and just kind of get your bearings and see what's going on around, what the buzz is like for the place, and it gives you a really good idea of what it's like there, just sitting and observing people walking by. And so for me, going to a cafe and grabbing a coffee just in an unknown city, in an unknown town, is just one of the great pleasures for me. So the exterior is a light roast Arabica, and the interior of the bag is crema. Okay, so the reason this bag is, the color choice of this bag is the way it is because it reminds me of coffee, sitting in a cafe after just traveling a few hours on a jet aircraft to get there. So it kind of ties in the inspiration of jet travel and coffee. Is kind of, you know, really intertwined for me as one of the pure pleasures in life. So on the inside we have a calfskin. This is also chrome tan leather. Now this has more of a pigment on it, so it's a pigmented leather, which means it's easier to clean, so it's more practical. If you spill something inside, you can wipe it down, and to clean it you just need a damp cloth, and that's all that's necessary. On the inside here we have a blue kid skin lining. So this is kid skin, very, very strong but extremely soft. It's a kid skin suede that is probably the softest leather that you'll ever come across. I like to say it's like feeling a puppy's ear. It's really, really soft. This happens to be in electric blue, and it kind of reminds me of a bespoke suit that you get on Savile Row in London, where you tend to go for more conservative, formal color choices. Maybe a brown, a black, a grey, a navy blue, something like that. Something quite conservative and mainstream. Yet what a lot of people like to do is have a brightly coloured pocket, or have some outlandish pattern, or just something a bit loud to give a little bit of personality, a little bit more of a pop. But it's not over. It's not open to anyone. Some people even go to, you know, getting a very brightly coloured lining that is rarely seen. But it's just something on the inside that tends to be hidden about your personality, that is a little bit more loud, a little bit more outlandish, and that's why I went for the electric blue. Difficult to pick up on from the lighting on this one, but it's an electric blue. It's quite bright actually. Now the design of this bag is very, very traditional. I've gone for natural materials, so I'm using a mixture of vegetable tan leather, chrome tan leather, solid brass, canvas. The only, I guess, unnatural thing on here that you wouldn't have many, many years ago is an edge finish, an edge paint, which is a lacquer that goes onto the edges just to give it more of a protective finish. So that's the de Havilland travel bag, and the course on how to build that is available on leathercraftmasterclass.com. We also have a course called the Art and Craft of Pattern Making. Now the idea behind the course is to empower people on how to make patterns, how to make them accurate and symmetrical, how the process is done. But I also take the opportunity to make the patterns for the de Havilland travel bag at the same time. So teaching you how to use patterns, teaching you how to make patterns rather, that you could then go off and make for a card holder, a wallet, even a watch strap, but the subject matter for that course was actually the de Havilland travel bag. So that is available as well. The courses on making handles, rolled handles, is also available, and that is also used for the de Havilland travel bag. Now the next bag is an older bag that I made some time ago, and it is a laptop briefcase. So it's a more contemporary laptop briefcase. Well, it'd have to be contemporary if it's a laptop, but it's a briefcase, but it's a modern version used for laptops. This is also using chrome tanned leather, a mixture of chrome tanned leather, vegetable tanned leather, and stingray skin, unsanded stingray skin, which has a more caviar-like effect. Now this is regular chrome tan hide on the front here. The corner protectors, so these here, which take most of the wear that could be replaced. This is vegetable tan leather, so veg tan on there. Also the piping is again vegetable tan leather, and the handles vegetable tan leather. Something I really like is handles that kind of mold to your hand over time, and nothing quite does that like veg tan leather. Now you could make the exterior of the handles and stitch in chrome tan leather with a core of vegetable tan leather, so leather cord, thick leather cord on the inside. That will also mold to your hand, but chrome tan, unless it's very dark, tends to look dirty very, very quickly. Now this is a more modern style. I would say personally my style is contemporary English leathercraft, so more modern English, but with definite influences from the past. So everything on here is saddle stitched and traditionally cut. I even think this was made before I purchased a skiving machine. So everything on here is hand skived with a skiving knife. On the inside, we have our laptop area here, so you can place your laptop and then close it. Then on the inside we have an area for business cards, pens, also a mobile phone, which is a molded piece actually, so chrome tan stuck to vegetable tan that's been molded and lined, and so that kind of gives you that shape there. So it holds that shape, but it's still soft and flexible for a mobile phone or cell phone. On the other side we have our internal pocket. So on this one we have a lining that's the same on the inside of the pocket as the inside of the bag itself, with a little clip on the end for your keys if necessary. Now this was actually a prototype, so I didn't end up using premium zips or premium suedes on the inside or anything like that. The idea of this is I wanted something that I would like to use, but I would see how it held up over the years. I think I've had this now probably going on 3 years, and it's been around the world with me. It's been stuffed into the back of cars and taxis, aeroplanes. Very, very durable, holds its shape extremely well. This one actually is the interlining on the inside applied to the leather to hold its shape, because chrome tan tends to be very soft and lose shape easily. On the inside of here I've actually gone for a synthetic, which I don't tend to do anymore. I prefer the more traditional way, but the inside here is actually a synthetic, which is foam. Okay, so very, very thin, high density foam. 125 kilogram per cubic meter is its density, I believe. 125 or 130. The idea is you have something that wants to regain shape all the time. It always wants to flatten out, and if you directly adhere that to leather, the leather will want to do that as well. There are pros and cons. You have to consider the reinforcement, because chrome tan leather likes to stretch a little bit over the years and with use, and so foam does as well. It's naturally stretchy, so it has the ability to hold the shape on something, but again there are pros and cons. It doesn't have the kind of non-stretch application that say canvas or something like that would have, whereas a synthetic version, it has the benefits of you you can fold it up into odd shapes and it will just kind of want to pack back out again with no issues at all. So that's the benefit of that. You just have to watch out for using things like craft foam or EVA foam, which is usually just micro bubbles of air. The issue with that is the air can escape under compression, the air comes out, and then when it's uncompressed, you then have a vacuum inside all the cells. So you have to go for high performance foams that are, instead of using air inside the foam, it's actually argon gas and nitrogen and things that are where the molecules are too big to get out. Essentially, higher performance foam, more expensive foams are going to tend to prevent creasing and things like that. Also, EVA foam, although it's easy to get, it's very thermo-moldable. So if you have a bag in an odd position in a hot car, when you take the bag out, it's going to retain that position. Or if you have it near a radiator or a heat source or something like that. So there are pros and cons to using modern materials versus more traditional materials. You know, back in the day, some of the cases like this would even have used newspaper, which was glued onto the leather with paste glue. Now that sounds absolutely hilarious if it weren't for the fact that there are some that are still looking in great condition 100 years later. So although some modern materials kind of are great for providing a shape and give that kind of really soft and supple feel to it, there are pros and cons. So it really depends on your design, what you're creating, and the kind of outcome that you're looking for. If you always start your designs with the outcome in mind, what's it for, how do I want it to age, you know, where would it suit, for who, then you ask yourself these kind of questions, it's easier to come up with an idea rather than just sit looking at a blank piece of paper. So the next bag, or should I say case, that I want to show you is the Bloomsbury attache case. Now this is also one of the video courses that I produce, so you can see me making this on camera, explaining how to make it, what thickness is, what measurements, what tools you need to use. If you want to learn how to make an attache case, leathercraftmasterclass.com, link below. So the case itself is spread over 2 courses, and the handle for the case is also spread over 2 courses. So the Bloomsbury attache case, which is this one here, this is in London colour, or what's also known as London tan, almost orange. Sometimes you see it's a little bit more yellowish, but they're all versions of London tan or London colour. So this is English bridal. So I get this from a local tannery near me, and kind of the choice or the inspiration behind this was I wanted to showcase the grain, or rather than the grain, the growth lines of the hide from the shoulder of the animal. So this is made from shoulder, English bridal shoulder, and you can see very slightly the growth lines from the animal in the front, and this is actually semi-pigmented, so it doesn't have just a dye over the surface. There is a light coating of pigment which equalizes everything out a little bit, stops it looking so raw and rustic, but it allows the depth of color, the variation of color, different tones to kind of highlight the growth lines. And I kept it horizontal on this because I thought, along with the color and the lines that look like stripes, it reminds me of a tiger, and I kind of like that about it. It's kind of a hidden meaning for a very formal business case. The inspiration for the handle is a strange one. My first exposure to leather goods was from my grandfather when I was very, very young. He had a collection of different cases for all sorts of different things. He was in a brass band, so he had cases for trumpets and things like that. He had business cases, and he had gramophone cases, all sorts of stuff. And they all had this kind of very, very similar handle. And I remember being fascinated by, you know, what was inside the case. He was showing me something, you know, the brass trumpet or the gramophone and how to turn it and crank it. And it was all very fascinating. But there was something strange. I always liked the bag, or the case that it was in rather, and the handle would fascinate me, because as a child my mind was, I always wanted to know how something worked. and how I could do it myself. It's just how I work and how I still work now. And it was funny, it's only 3 days ago from filming this that I actually found the case. My dad had it in his attic, I believe, and it was about 26 years since I've seen it. And it was that handle on that case that inspired me to want to create a course on handle making and how to make the case itself. And I took a quick picture, which I'll show you now, of the handle, and it's remarkably similar to the one I ended up making 26 years later on camera. And it was really strange that I wanted to film this and talk about the inspiration behind what I make, and I ended up finding the exact handle that inspired this in the first place. And if it wasn't for that, you probably wouldn't be sitting there at home watching this. So, you know, just something interesting. So this is built on a board base. So it's a stiffer board than most companies use for what is known as a lid over base attache case, which is this one. So it has a very strong stiff structure, the board that we use in this. So the alternative to this is the more box-like briefcase, which is generally made from plywood, poplar plywood, cedar plywood, that kind of thing. But you also get the increased wall thickness, so you have less internal space for the same dimensions. It's also generally a lot heavier. So I wanted to create a lid over base attache that had the strength and stiffness of a more box-like briefcase in a lid over base. So this is the more traditional look. I find the more modern attache cases with the box construction with an internal lip, I find them a bit 80s, a bit 90s. They look a bit dated, whereas this kind of design is pure vintage, really. So it goes so far back, it's cool again. That's just my personal preference. This also comes with a key clochette in the same bridle leather that's been split down, and that obviously goes for these locks here. So on the inside, we have a pigskin suede. So this is a suede that is very, very durable. Pigskin tends to be very durable. This is actually a full grain suede. What I mean is, generally, well, the idea is you don't use the grain layer on the outside. So the grain layer is actually stuck to the boards on the inside of the case. So what you're actually seeing is the flesh side. So it's split down, and we use the top split, and then the nap or the back or the flesh side is buffed to a very smooth finish. So it's very, very silky, very, very smooth. Traditionally use a skiver, which is a split sheepskin with a pigmented surface finish. Used a lot in bookbinding, but it's used in cases because it's easier to clean. So although I prefer suede, it's softer, has a more luxurious feel. It is more difficult to clean. If you spill something or you get ink, for example, then you can remove it. But the glue that I've used on the inside of the case, much like they would have used decades, centuries ago, is a water-based glue that can be reactivated with a damp sponge. So if I were to go over this with a damp sponge, after about 30 minutes of just continuously dabbing it, I could eventually peel it off and it would come off like a sticky label in one. It would stretch out. You wouldn't want to use the same pigskin again, but I could, if I needed to, replace it. And that's the idea. I believe it's one of the Hermes family members that said luxury is that which can be repaired. And that was the design ethos behind this bag. If I need to repair it, or someone many years from now needs to repair this bag, it wouldn't be too difficult, but it will also last the test of time. So the construction had to be spot on. So you can see on the inside there, we use brass hardware, and we've actually gone over, you can feel slightly on the inside a raised area where the hardware is, but it's out the way, and there's also a lip on the top. So when you close it, it clears and it just lightly contacts before coming to a stop. And that's the idea. So the dimensions are just tight enough that you can feel the air whooshing out at the last second before closing the lid. The handle, which is probably the most interesting part of the build on this one. I find it very interesting to make. Fully vegetable tan leather on the outside, on the inside, the core filler area, and I like to have a very slim profile on mine, so not too big, allows a little bit of compression over the ears, but I don't tend to like fillers that are too fat, that fill up the hand too much. It should be just comfortable to hold in the hand when there's a heavy load inside the bag, essentially. So the shape of the handle is very well considered, but it's a shape that is very, very traditional. The next bag I'd like to show you is the Buckram Weekender. Now this is something that's been traveling with me quite a bit as well. This is a fully vegetable tan leather bag with a canvas lining. So the inspiration behind this particular bag is trunks and vintage luggage. So I like the idea of using vegetable tan leather, something very strong, rugged, rustic. I haven't used a leather with any pigment at all, so it's not even semi-pigmented. It is just aniline dyed, so you'll see little color variations all over, and it makes up the character of this bag. The idea of this bag is it's something that's very tough, very strong, will last a long time, and I'm not afraid to throw it in the back of a car at the last minute to get to the airport quickly. It's in my mind, although there's a lot of craftsmanship, a lot of stitching, a lot of thought gone into the design of this, this is meant to be more rugged. Not necessarily look more rugged, but it's designed to be a tough bag. So again, rolled handles, vegetable tan leather on here. We have a little key clochette because the zips on the front of the bag come together and they have a compartment or a space where you can actually put a lock on the inside. The design of this is interesting. The stitching is all on the outside, but it has an internal seam and an external seam. So a lot of stitching in this one, and it has a welt, okay? Very similar to a welt you'd have on a shoe, like a Goodyear welt, for example. So the gusset is stitched onto the welt, which is essentially just a strip of leather, 2mm leather, I believe in this case. And then that strip is glued to the external part of the bag, to the edges of the bag, and then the whole thing is stitched in. So we have a 6 or 7mm edge there, so it's quite thick, very robust, very, very stiff, and surprisingly not that heavy considering what it's made from. The inside of the bag, so it's an M10 Riri zip, so it's rather stout. And we have a small lock here which has been wrapped in the same bridle leather, so it's been split down to about 0.5 mm, maybe a fraction more, and then wrapped around there with a seamless design, then glued on. The way I like to finish these off is actually with acrylic Resolene. So if you're not stitching it on, cover it with Resolene and it becomes a more uniform exterior, so nothing catches to come off. So the inside of this bag, you can see it's a canvas layer. So this is a chevron canvas. I believe this is linen. So not too soft, but not particularly rugged. It's not going to catch on anything. It feels smooth, but it's not as soft as, say, cotton lining or something like that, or even suede. But this is a durable, strong canvas, stronger than cotton canvas. We have an internal pocket, reinforced with leather. And the inside of the pocket is again canvas, so it's a material lining. I don't always like to have a bag which is everything has to be leather on it. Sometimes it's nice, and other times it kind of breaks up the design a little bit more. It's a bit like, I like chocolate muffins, but if it's chocolate inside with chocolate bits covered in a chocolate icing dipped in chocolate, it becomes a little bit too much, even though I'd eat that. But sometimes just to break it up with a little bit of, I don't know, some kind of raspberry topping or something that gives it a bit more interest, so it's not too saturated in one type of material, aka leather. So sometimes I do like using materials, tough materials, materials where I've seen them still in great condition in vintage leather goods. I've had the opportunity to look at a couple of private collections, one of them with a worth of over in excess of $1 million, actually two of them. And just some of the craftsmanship in there is just so inspiring. There's one museum that I definitely recommend you go to, which is the Baggage Museum in Haguenau in France, near Alsace. Beautiful place, great for vintage luggage, but some of the pieces in there you think there's no way that kind of design would last so long, but it has, using very good materials, good quality leather, good quality stitching, strong thread, canvas linings, things like that, and they just last so long. Solid brass. Sometimes, you know, the tried and tested materials still are the best. Although there's modern alternatives that come out, we don't always know how long they're going to last or what happens to them after a decade, 2 decades of use. You just never know. So for that reason, I like vintage. Not because I'm necessarily playing it safe, but I like it kind of... I look towards the future, but occasionally I like to look over my shoulder at the past and, you know, take inspiration from that and take the techniques and designs that they've used to create some of the most beautifully made leather goods that I've ever seen, some of the old vintage pieces. Now, the bottom of this bag is a good example of what I actually avoided in the whole cut de Havilland travel bag. So this is made up of 3 pieces. So we have a piece on the side, a piece on the base, and a piece on the other side as well. And as you can see, there's a piece here that has to be lapped, so it has to be skived, so it kind of tapers into each other, the base and the panel here, and then that stitch going all the way down there. If you can imagine a bag of this size opened out completely, it's very awkward to stitch. So it takes up a lot of time. You're going through a lot of layers of leather. You've got leather, you've got the reinforcement, which is Buckram in this case on the inside of the bag, which was used in trunks many years ago and baggage. So it's a Buckram stiffener. It goes through leather, Buckram, through leather again, through the internal layer of canvas, and then, you know, you got to stitch through all that. You have to use an awl. You really can't do it with any pricking iron. There's just too many layers to penetrate through accurately. It's very easy to mess up, and you'd end up with very big holes, even with a modern pricking iron. So all usage is necessary, but it's very awkward to stitch this in. One of the most awkward things you can do. And it's so long and so thick that you have to stop and start again, I think 2 or 3 times on this one, because it just uses up so much thread in a seam that long, and twice and around the edges. So by avoiding that, I kind of had a silhouette that's continuous and seamless on the de Havilland travel bag, but it also saves a remarkable amount of time. Another thing on the de Havilland travel bag that isn't on this, the de Havilland travel bag actually uses a single seam reinforced external zip. So you can see the reinforcing leather that goes around the zip on this bag from vegetable tan leather. There is one seam going all the way around. On this one, however, we have a thicker piece of leather that goes all the way around, where the outside is stitched onto the bag first, and then the inside seam is then stitched onto the zip and internal layer of canvas. So it requires 2 seams, which is also a long journey in itself. When you get the first one done, you need to take a break and before you do the second one. So the de Havilland travel bag avoids that by having a slightly thinner strip of reinforcing leather around the side. Now this is more decorative, but it also means that it stiffens up the zip area, so you don't have to hold on to the bag to pull the zip, because sometimes the friction of the zip is enough that the leather starts to move or stretch and you can't open it as easily. Whereas when you're using a thicker piece of leather on there, it stiffens up the zip, which makes opening and closing much easier. It also gives a nicer silhouette to the bag and holds its shape around the bag, much like its piping holds its shape. So this is a very long, complicated build. It's a great bag, love the look. Kind of like that curve along the top, almost looks like a saddle. So it's, you know, there's a lot of design aspects that I've put into there that I really enjoy. but you know, it was it's a lot of stitching involved, put it that way, a lot of thread. So yeah, it really depends when it comes to designing a bag, the outcome, what you want it for, taking inspiration from different areas of your life, of your history, things that you enjoy, what could you add into it. You know, if I was to say to most people, oh yeah, I want you to design a bag for me that has something to do with a vintage aircraft and coffee, go. You know, most people will be like, you can't put, how would you put coffee into the design of your bag? How would you put an aeroplane in the design of your bag? Well, it just means kind of thinking about what you like and design aspects of something that already exists. Or, you know, it's not just the shape where you can put inspiration into, it's the color, it's the texture. You know, I like the tiger stripe effect of the growth rings in the hide for the attache case. I wanted to put that in there and showcase those lines vertically to give that tiger effect. Even though it's subtle and most people might not pick up on it, it's a little bit of me going into the design, and it's that kind of rawness, almost vulnerability sometimes, because not a lot of people are going to notice what you've done, but you're putting your heart and soul into something and then offering it out into the world. But if you kind of design and create with integrity, with honesty, without trying to figure out shorter ways of doing things or shortcuts necessarily just for the sake of it, but considering the design, what you could change, what you can adapt, what inspires you that you could bring into it, you just have to be honest with it. You have to be real with it and think to yourself that there's so much out there that can inspire me that I can then use to create. It doesn't have to be all original thoughts and original ideas. You know, I didn't invent this type of bag. I didn't invent a lot of things. Certain things I might be the first to do in certain categories, but you know, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm creating a wheel how I think and feel the wheel should look. So I hope this has been informative for you. I hope that you've taken some kind of inspiration from it, some ideas from it. You're not going to take the entire video and think, you know, this is completely going to transform. What I would love is for you to stop and think about everything that you do and question why you're doing it. And when you start to think why you do every little thing that you do, you start to come up with answers. And if you don't have an answer, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. So if you think, why am I stitching it 4mm from the edge? Why am I using this particular edge finish? Why am I using that color? Why am I using that thread? Why have I designed it this way? Why am I using that kind of lining? Why is it this kind of shape? As long as you have an answer for all of that, and it makes sense to you, and it comes from you, then I think that's a good thing. So if you question everything that you do, you'll make everything that you make with honesty and something that really comes from you. And to me, that's what inspiration is. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out leathercraftmasterclass.com, link below. Don't forget also to like and subscribe and turn on your notifications to let you know when I come out with the next video. Thank you for watching and keep your all blades sharp.